Hey everybody, welcome to the video. It's Friday, June 25th, and we're breaking down this pretty big 13-game slate that we have over on DraftKings today. I'm more of a fan when the slates are around 6 to 9 games. Once we start getting into the double digits, things get a little bit more confusing because there's just so many good teams to pick from, and you're going to see that today. The Yankees, the Blue Jays, the Astros are all in fantastic spots, and there's some other solid stacks as well. So there's lots of options to talk about, and we're going to be breaking it all down here. And if you do find this video helpful in any way possible, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Just a free, easy way to help show your support to the channel without becoming an official Patreon member. But if you do want to become an official Patreon member and join the community, we have a few hundred of us over there. Now is the best time to do so, and I realize it's the end of the month, so it's usually not the best time to do it for Patreon, but if you do sign up, and if you continue your patronage through July, I can refund this last week for you, so you get this last week free, so I think it's actually a pretty good deal. Projections, cheat sheets, data sheets, Discord community, all that good stuff. Link is down below in the description. And if you want to follow me over on social media, you know where to find me using the handles in the bottom hand corner of your screen. But I think that's it for the plugs for the most part. So without further ado, let's dive into today's video. And as per usual, we'll start with the pitchers, then move on to the bats. And up top, we have our ace of the slate, Carlos Rodon, $10,700. A bit pricey, but it's going to be hard to fade him in my opinion because he draws a really good matchup versus Seattle. He's one of the better pitchers in baseball, only a 3.2 implied team total against him. Pretty heavy favorite, 8K prop over in Vegas. He's pitching at home, and his numbers on the season have been pretty darn impressive. He pitches deep into games, 100 pitches per game, 1.83 ERA, which is amazing, 2.91 xFIP, 2.7 Sierra, close to a 37% K rate, close to 13 Ks per 9, less than a 100 ISO given up this season with below a 200 WOBA. And the kicker here is that it's a fantastic matchup versus Seattle as a lefty. They've been pretty bad versus them so far this season. They've had a little bit of pop overall once you combine righties and lefties, but versus lefties this season, 167 ISO, 282 OBP, 88 WRC plus, 27.6% K rate. I think Carlos Rodon should have no problem moving down this lineup, and just raw points wise, he's definitely the best play on the slate in my opinion. Framber Valdez, $10,200. Not sure if you're going to be able to fit in both of these guys. If you can, by all means go for it. But the problem is if you do roster both of these guys, there's no like absolute free plays on the slate in terms of offense. Yes, there's always some dirt cheap catchers, but in recent days we've had guys like Wander Franco. He's been free. We had some really dirt cheap other players at other positions, so it's not really the case today. Yes, you can find some other cheap bats, but there's nothing like super stands out. Like Toros, he's in the mid 3K range. He's no longer 2K, so you can't just plug and play like two expensive pitchers and just get some cheap bats and then load them up with the expensive bats. I mean, it's been fun the past couple days doing that, but I feel like that's kind of ending today. Obviously, there's always some value bats we can find, but nothing that's like super obvious for cash games today. So I'm not sure you're gonna be able to fit in both of these guys. And if I had to pick one, I'm obviously gonna side with Carlos Rodon here, but Framber Valdez gets about the best matchup you can ask for as a left-handed pitcher. Yes, Seattle has struggled versus lefties this season, but Detroit has been absolutely horrendous versus lefties this year. Like they haven't been great versus righties, but versus lefties it's bad. 29.4% K rate, 77 WRC plus, only a 124 team ISO, and a 282 WOBA. They are walking a little bit, but just a putrid offense versus left-handed pitching this season, and Valdez doesn't have the biggest sample size this year, around 30-some innings. He's been good in that small sample size. A 3.2 xFIP, 3.1 Sierra, paired with a really good ERA, although he's getting a bit lucky there considering his underlying numbers are about a run or two higher. Kind of same with Carlos Rodon, but he's still got elite numbers to back it up. The strikeout rate's not elite, 22.1%, but doesn't really walk a ton of guys. Still less than a 200 batting average given up, only a 0.39 ISO, 71% ground ball rate, and a 246 WOBA, so he's purely a matchup play. And once again, the Astros are pretty much the best stack on the slate right up there with the Blue Jays. Are kind of interchangeable for the most part, and the Yankees are right there with them, but I wouldn't say they're quite on their level tonight. So as long as he can go to 5+ innings, he should very easily be able to pick up the win unless he happens to get rocked. But I have a hard time seeing Valdez get rocked here versus Detroit, so I think he's a fine play in all formats, but if I had to pick one, which you're probably going to have to pick one today, I would definitely side with Carlos Rodon, definitely my favorite pitcher on the slate. Then after Valdez, we kind of get some SP2 options here in Chris Paddack, Mike Minor, then a dirt cheap option in Dane Dunning, who I've actually kind of liked ever since he got called up. He's been solid for me in certain spots, but we're going to talk about him in a little bit. We'll start with Chris Paddack, $8,800. I believe the last two games, the strikeouts have been up for him, 11 strikeouts in his most recent start. the 9 in the last one. Gets a good matchup here versus Arizona. He's pitching at home in Petco, which is definitely a pitcher-friendly park. And his numbers this season aren't great, but they're not bad, and I wouldn't say they're below average. They're actually just kind of solid for the most part. The one thing I like about him is he doesn't really walk many guys, and the strikeout rate's sitting at around 26%. The one issue with him is he will give some power over a 200 ISO given up this season, and it's actually a pretty good matchup versus Arizona. Looking at their splits this year, nothing too impressive versus righties. 24.2% K rate, pretty low ISO at 133, 292 WOBA, and a 83 WRC plus, which is the lowest of all these teams, even worse than the Detroit Tigers this season versus right-handed pitching. So Chris Paddock as an SP2 does grade out decently well for me, and I could see him being decently popular tonight. Only a 3.2 implied team total against him, and he's a very heavy favorite, 70% chance for a win, 6K prop. And the Padres, I'd say, are a pretty good stack tonight versus Corbin Martin, so he should be able to pick up the win, assuming he can go those 5+ innings. The Mike Minor, $8,700, probably the tournament pivot off of Paddock, and it's kind of like a similar pattern to what we talked about with Rodon and Valdez. Rodon's your cash game guy, I'd say the more safe option between those two. Then Valdez is a good play in tournaments. Chris Paddock, probably your cash game guy there. But Mike Minor is a decent pivot in tournaments, although you could make the case for playing Minor in cash games. I wouldn't have an issue with that. I just kind of like chasing that 3.2 implied team total for Paddock because that is very, very low right there with Carlos Rodon. But anyway, Mike Minor, his numbers this season, the exact same K rate as Chris Paddock, sitting at 25.8%. Slightly higher in walks, but nothing too crazy. Gives up a little bit of power, so kind of a similar pitcher to Paddock in terms of their numbers this season, both giving up around a 1.5 homer per 9, around a 30% hard contact rate. But it is a pretty soft matchup here versus the Texas Rangers versus lefties. So far this season, they're not striking out a ton, but they're walking a lot. They've had zero power pretty much, 132 team ISO, 82 WRC plus. So it's kind of just a matchup play for the most part. I'd say I prefer Paddock, but if you want to play Minor, it should be a little bit lower ownership. I have no issue with that. 4 implied team total here, kind of 50-50 for the win. So I would side with Paddock there, but Minor's definitely a fine option. Then on the flip side of this game, we have Dane Dunning here, $6,400. Just feel like he's a bit too cheap. He's definitely not my favorite option tonight, and I'd probably have a hard time going in there in cash games. Don't think you really have to go this low, but his numbers aren't that bad. And when you factor in his price tag, I just feel like he's a little bit underpriced. The ERA sitting at around 5 is definitely going to keep some people off of him, but the underlying numbers are pretty good with a 3.3 xFIP, 3.7 SIERA, around a 25% K rate. Can walk some guys, but doesn't give up too much power. Only a 114 ISO, 55% ground ball rate, hard contact rates getting close to 40%, but less than a homer per 9. The Royals, while they do have some decent bats in the lineup, we have some power guys like Salvador Perez, but overall this season versus righties, only a 143 team ISO. They don't strike out a ton, and they are walking a little bit in 89 WRC plus and a WOBA above 300, but it's not like elite level numbers, so I think it's $6,400. He should be able to kind of glide by and have a decent game at $6,400. I mean, only a 4 implied team total against him, so 50% chance for a win. So if he can happen to go the 5+ innings, maybe he can pick up that win, which will go a long way at that low price point, but probably only a tournament option for me on this slate. But with that being said, guys, that'll be it for the pitching, so let's move right on to the bats. I definitely think it's more fun to talk about the bats tonight than the pitching. Because, yes, we have Carlos Rodon, but outside of that, nothing I'm, like, super excited about playing. But the bats tonight, there's some bad pitchers on the mound. We have Willie Peralta, Martin Perez, Matt Harvey, and you guys are going to see that pretty much up and down the sheet here. It's almost every single player we are talking about because these guys are definitely the most pick-onable pitchers, if that's even a word, on this entire slate. So, let's start up top with the catcher position. Gary Sanchez, $4,600. He's kind of been on fire recently. I know a lot of you probably didn't play that early slate yesterday, but he went deep once again. He's been on fire for a couple weeks now. He's just, I mean, the power's been there. He's getting a bump in the order. Projected to be batting 3rd tonight. I definitely have plenty of interest in Scary Gary if it happens that you are able to afford a spend-up catcher. The problem is I'm not in love with any cheap pitching tonight, and there's definitely going to be some expensive power bats that want my lineup like Vlad, Yordan Alvarez, some of the Yankees outfielders. So I'm probably not going to prioritize Gary Sanchez here. I'm kind of a fan of just rostering the cheap catcher on my favorite offenses, which is what I have here with Martin Maldonado and Reese McGuire. But if you got the money for Gary Sanchez, you are saving some money at the pitcher position today. Don't hate using him because he's got plenty of power versus lefties, and Martin Perez is just not a very good pitcher, and the Boston bullpen isn't exactly the greatest thing in the world. They're also on the road in Fenway, which is a hitter-friendly park, and you get those guaranteed ninth inning at bats as well, and they have a 5.5 implied team total. And on the season, while Gary Sanchez isn't hitting for a high batting average, does have an ISO above 220 this season. So if you got the money for him, great. If not, don't think it's the end of the world. You could just roster a guy like Maldonado or McGuire here, both on great offenses tonight. And since they're on great offenses, I assume they're going to score runs. And the more runs they score, the more at-bats they get, and they're hitting at the bottom of the order. So I know that's not super appealing, but they should get plenty of ABs here. And Maldonado, he had another productive game yesterday. I believe he had a 2 RBI single at one point, and then I don't think he did anything after that. But at those price tags, that's all you need. If you get on base and you score a run, that is just fine at that price point. So he's going to be viable, even though he's a terrible hitting catcher. Same goes for McGuire. I think he ended up having 2 hits in a run yesterday, which was around 9 points, which is just fine. I think he was $2,100. Like, you will take that all day for a guy that's around $2,000. So, personally, for me, I'm probably just going to either roster Maldonado or McGuire here, and I'll probably end up siding with McGuire because he's a little bit cheaper, and he's a lefty versus Matt Harvey, and we all know how bad Matt Harvey is. Any single time he's on the mound, you can roster the opposing offense, even if it was like something like the Pirates or the Tigers, but now he's facing the Blue Jays, which has an endless lineup of really good players. They even got George Springer back recently. I think I have the entire Blue Jays roster here, so yes, I love all the Blue Jays here. Team total above 6 today. I had to make sure I was reading that right. I want to say it almost said 5.2, but that seemed a little bit too low. Yeah, it's at 6.24. Like, yeah, it's definitely going to be a good matchup here for the Blue Jays. Try to get as many of them as in your lineup as you possibly can. And I kind of forgot to talk about this about the Astros, but their team total is at 5.6 or 5.58, I guess, which is very close to it. Wouldn't be surprised if that gets closer to 6 by the time the game starts. But Astros have been on fire. I think they've won, what, 11 games in a row, I think I just saw on Twitter. I'm not really one to keep track of the win-loss record. I just care how it goes for DFS purposes. I could care less if they won or lost. But, yeah, they've been on fire. They scored 12 runs, 12 or 13 runs. Yordan Alvarez had that grand slam with 8 runs. So I think they scored 12. And, yeah, they've been on fire for the most part. So all the Yankees today, like all the Astros, and I like all the Blue Jays, and you're going to see that down below. So they all find themselves in fantastic spots. Dropping out of first base, we have Vlad, $6,200. I mean, he's just been one of the best players in baseball this season. I mean, he's definitely one of the top candidates for MVP. This is just the problem for me is that Shohei Ohtani's right there with them, plus he pitches. That's what's giving me the edge for him. But Vlad just is a pure hitter. I mean, the guy has been absolutely awesome. You guys don't need to tell you that, but he's batting around 350 this season, above a 330 ISO, 200-something WRC plus, 675 slugging, 445 OBP, 1100 OPS. I mean, what more do you want from Vlad here? I know he's super expensive. He went deep last night versus Kramer. Blue Jays absolutely crushed him in the first inning. Don't think he made it out of the first inning. They ended up having a very, very strong day. So, like, going right back to the Blue Jays here versus Matt Harvey, who's arguably one of the worst, if not the worst starter in baseball. Yuli Gurriel, $5,000 if you're stacking the Astros. And it's kind of as simple as this, guys. If you're stacking Blue Jays, you play Vlad. If you're stacking Astros, you play Yuli. If you're stacking Yankees, you play Luke Voigt. I mean, it's kind of as simple as that. Now, in cash games, it's a little bit different because you're going to have to find some value guys because you can't just play Vlad. You can't play Altuve. You can't play the most expensive guys everywhere, so you're going to have to find some value bats, but all these guys make plenty of sense for me. Yuli Gurriel gets Willie Peralta here. I mean, I can't imagine he's going to last long in this game. The Detroit bullpen's not exactly the greatest thing in the world. They even had Harold Castro pitching in the 9th inning yesterday. I believe that's when Yordan Alvarez hit his grand slam. I can't remember when he came in. I'm not sure if it was before that or not. But anyway, I mean, Detroit's bullpen's nothing great this season. If you're looking at their team XFIP this season as a bullpen, I know it was like in the low 4s at one point this season, but I think it's risen a little bit. So yeah, 4.59 now. Once that updates, it's probably going to be closer to 4.6 something. So yeah, they've definitely been struggling as of late, and I think the Astros just continue to roll. Team total of nearly 6 here. I would not be surprised if they score 6+ runs in this game. Like all the Astros, Gurriel, batting average close to 320 this season, over a 200 ISO, just a good pure hitter. Luke Voigt, $4,400. Numbers aren't super impressive this season, but I mean, he's been hurt. It's a smaller sample size. He went deep a couple of days ago. I forget exactly what he did in the early slate today because I just really wasn't paying attention to it too much. And the Yankees ended up scoring, I want to say, 8 runs, so he might have had a strong day. But he's fairly priced at $4,400. Faces a lefty, Martin Perez, who is very average at the very best. I'd say a very below average pitcher. So like the ready power here for the Yankees. They grid out very well versus a guy like Martin Perez. He's a low strikeout pitcher, and he's just not very good, and will give some power. Dropping out second base, Jose Altuve, $6,000. He has a monstrous price tag, so you're probably only getting here in full-on Astros stack, but I definitely don't think he's a necessary piece in cash games today just because of that price point. Like, I can get a guy like Yordan Alvarez. I'd probably just rather play a guy like him for the same price point, and I'd rather kind of go a little bit cheaper with a guy like LeMahieu or Chavez. But, I mean, if you're playing all the Astros and you're stacking them up and you're going cheap a pitcher today, don't have an issue with Altuve. He's batting around 300 this season with a good amount of power. I want to say he's got 16 homers on the season, ISO around 230. I mean, he's a fine option. It's hard to stomach that price point, to be honest, but he's still an elite play. DJ LeMahieu, $4,400. I could see a lot of people going this route in cash games, just try to get exposure to the Yankees where he's not super expensive, because guys like Judge and Stanton are all above $5,000. So when you can get DJ LeMahieu leading off for the Yankees, which are one of the best stacks in the entire slate, also on the road in Fenway, so you get the guaranteed inning at bats. I mean, you should get plenty of at bats here, and $4,400 is a pretty good price point for him. I know he hasn't really been great this season, only batting 260 with less than a 100 ISO, but I mean, Martin Perez is just so bad. I think we can definitely use all the Yankees here. Then Michael Chavis here, $3,000. He's just a dirt cheap option. He led off yesterday. Assuming he's leading off once again, Domingo Germán is not a terrible pitcher or anything, but they still have a team total of 5 today. And on the season, it's a pretty small sample size, but he's batting 275 with a 212 ISO. I know he's not the greatest hitter out there, but if he ends up leading off for only $3,000, that makes him in consideration for cash games to me, just to try to find some salary relief. Because like I said, guys, there is no longer any just dirt cheap value plays that we can easily plug in. Like, this is the lowest price guy we're going to talk about. Obviously, there's some other guys you can kind of venture off to if you want to. There's nothing that really stood out to me too much that I wanted to talk about them, but there are some other viable options. And then dropping on third base, we have Kevin Biggio, $4,400, a more affordable Blue Jay bat. He's not super expensive. I don't love paying that much for Biggio, especially since he hits near the bottom of the order, and his numbers this season, about a 170 ISO and 230 batting average, but he's a lefty versus Matt Harvey, and we know exactly how bad Harvey is versus left-handed bats, and they have a team total north of 6 today, which is insane, almost like they're playing in Coors Field. Gio Urshela, $3,100, not a big power guy, 167 ISO this season, but around a 270 batting average, just kind of a solid hitter for the most part. Hits near the bottom of the order, and all the third basemen we're going to talk about today hit or projected to be batting 7, so you're not going to get a great batting order here unless something gets shaken up in the orders. But Urshela, if you're just trying to get some righty power or just a righty bat versus Martin Perez, he makes sense in that sense. Abraham Toro, $3,500. He's been putting up some points recently. Small sample size this season, but he is batting around 300. And look, I like all the Astros here. I know he hits near the bottom of the order, and the price is coming up a little bit. I miss when he was like dirt cheap at $2,100, and he was even cheaper yesterday at $3,100. But it makes sense to get all these Astros a little bit pricier because they have been hitting the ball very, very well recently. And I don't think that's going to stop versus Alta tonight. Then dropping down to shortstop, I did not put Bo Bichette on here because I didn't want to put Bichette, Marcus Semien, and Carlos Correa. All these guys way above $5,000. So you can play Bichette, but Marcus Semien, I'd prefer him over him. You can also play him at second base as well. But he's been great this season, batting close to 300, over a 230 ISO. You got some speed upside, and it's just Matt Harvey. He sucks. Roster any Blue Jay you can versus him. Carlos Correa, $5,200. He had a really good game last night. I want to say around 18 to 20 points. And I just like stacking up all the Astros. I would prefer the Blue Jays over the Astros today, but the Astros are right there with them with being the top stack on the entire slate. And Correa, another guy that's batting around 300 this season with above a 200 ISO, so kind of some similar numbers to Marcus Semien, both playing on fantastic offenses. And Gleyber Torres, $3,500, kind of the same exact play as Gio Urshela. So if you just want exposure to the Yankees righties, I like Gleyber Torres there, but I'd really try to get to Marcus Semien or Carlos Correa if I can try to, because I just don't really want to play Gleyber Torres that much, but if you have to, I don't hate the price tag for him. And then dropping down to the outfield, pretty loaded position today. Like, you can make a case for all these guys in cash games or tournaments today. Jordan Alvarez, $6,000. Another day, another homer for him. Had a grand slam last night. Ended with a pretty strong score, as did most of the Astros bats. They get a nice matchup here versus Willie Peralta. On the season, Alvarez is batting over 300 with over a 200 ISO. And I mean, it makes no sense not to want to keep playing these Astros bats. So I like Alvarez here. Just don't like that price point. Would only get there in tournaments. Giancarlo Stanton and Aaron Judge, pretty much the same plays here. If I had to pick one, I guess I'll side with Aaron Judge. But Stanton absolutely mashes left-handed pitching. But I just like the little price discount we get with Aaron Judge. And I mean, they both have massive amounts of power versus left-handed pitching. So pretty much what I usually do with Stanton and Judge, whoever's the cheaper one, I usually just side with them over the other one. But they're both fantastic players here. I have nothing bad to say about either of them. Teoscar Hernandez, $4,700, batting cleanup for arguably the best offense in the entire slate today. Batting average around 300 this season with close to a 200 ISO. He is a guy that can strike out a little bit, but I don't think we have to worry about that with Matt Harvey. Michael Brantley, $4,500. My favorite player. He just consistently gets hits, makes contact every single time he's up to bat. I saw him strike out yesterday, which was a rare sight for him. He doesn't really strike out too much. On the season, Brantley's only striking out at a 10% clip, but he's batting around 350. He's got a decent amount of power. Not a big home run guy, but he can get doubles. I know he had one last night, and I believe this month he's batting like 530 or something. It's something crazy like that. He's been on absolute fire. The price tag is coming up. Like a couple weeks ago, Brantley was, I want to say, like $3,200, which is insane for one of the best pure contact hitters in baseball. He's finally starting to rise a little bit, which I don't love because I just want to keep playing Michael Brantley for free. And even last night, he was only like 30-40% owned in cash games, which I thought was a little bit too low for Brantley. But $4,500 is still a fine price point for him. He's going to produce. He does it each and every single night. He doesn't really strike out. And I love guys like that in cash games that just don't swing and miss. Like, he's going to put the ball in play. It's just a matter of if the defender's going to be there or not. And more so often than not this season, the defender has not been there because he's been batting over 500. So, yeah, definitely like Michael Brantley here. The price has risen, but still think you can play him in all formats. Cody Bellinger, $4,300. I don't have any Dodgers listed here just because I'm so in love with the Astros, Blue Jays, and the Yankees tonight. But the Dodgers lefties are in a good spot versus Jake Arrieta. Max Muncy is going to be back. I think you could roster him. And you can play some of the righties too. Mookie Betts, Justin Turner would have no issue with that. Gavin Lux is viable. He's a lefty. With Corey Seager being out, he's definitely getting some playing time. So you can use the lefties here versus Arrieta. He just cannot really produce swing and misses versus them. And Bellinger at this price point, I know he's been kind of terrible this year. But batting cleanup, team total above 5 here. I think he makes sense in tournaments. I feel like he's going to go a bit overlooked because everyone's going to play the teams that I've been talking about throughout the entire video. Randall Grichuk, $4,300. I mean, there's going to be plenty of RB opportunity here for the spot he's hitting in. It's Matt Harvey. You can use all the Blue Jays you possibly can think of. I'm pretty sure we have talked about every single one of them so far, besides George Springer, who's going to be last in this video. And then I don't think I have Lourdes Gurriel, but you can play the entire lineup here. And Kyle Tucker, $4,200. Not really the same exact kind of play as Michael Brantley because he doesn't have quite the batting average, but he's got plenty of pop in his bat, more power than Michael Brantley has. And on the season, he's got a 238 ISO. And facing Willie Peralta, definitely like the home run upside here for Kyle Tucker at a decently low price point compared to most of the Astros. And then George Springer here, $3,900. I missed when he was the leadoff guy, but batting fifth still a fine spot for producing runs and things like that. And love all the Blue Jays here. So at that price point, I think we could definitely see George Springer being decently popular, especially when they have a team total above 6 and you're facing Matt Harvey. But with that being said, guys, that's going to be it for the video. So I hope it was helpful, and if it was, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I posted my first NASCAR video of the weekend, which is going to be 2 and then 2 live streams because we have a double header this weekend. So if you want to check that out, feel free to do that. I'll try to link it or put it in the end card on the video if you do want to check that out. Follow me over on social media if you want, using the handles in the bottom right corner of your screen. And if you want to help support the channel over on Patreon, you can get this last week free if you do sign up. And as long as you continue your patronage through July, I can hit that refund button for you so you kind of get a bit of a deal there, get a bang for your buck. But with that being said, guys, I will stop rambling. Hope you guys enjoy the start to your weekend. See you all in the next video.